The forest never slept. Even in winter, even under snow, it breathed. They told me to crawl forward, find cover, and listen for movement in the trees. That was the order. Simple enough. But hours passed. Snow fell thicker. The branches creaked louder. And soon, it wasn't the enemy I was listening for. It was the forest itself. Because out there, among the pines and the snow, silence isn't empty. It listens back. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. If you enjoy these slow, reflective war stories, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's always grounding to see this small community spread across the world, finding stillness together. Now dim the lights. Let the quiet of the room join with the quiet of the woods. Tonight's story isn't about battle or bullets. It's about what happens when you're left alone in the snow, listening to a forest that refuses to stay silent. This is The Forest That Listens. They pushed me forward at dusk. No flare. No shout. Just a hand on my shoulder and a whisper in my ear. Find a spot in the trees. Stay low. Report what you hear. I nodded. Didn't argue. Orders weren't questions. So I crawled, belly down, through drifts of snow that swallowed my elbows and numbed my fingers. Behind me, the trench faded. Ahead, the forest rose dark against a pale sky, a black wall of pines weighed heavy with white. The snow muffled everything. My breath. My boots. The distant mutter of the line behind. Even my thoughts felt quieter, dulled by the weight of winter. Each step forward was swallowed by the earth, as if the forest meant to erase me before I even arrived. I found a hollow between two fallen trees. A natural cover, snow piled high, branches leaning close, shadows thick. From there, I could see the tree lean open into a clearing, a flat stretch where tracks would show, where movement couldn't hide. Perfect, they would have said. Perfect for watching. Perfect for waiting. But already, I felt the forest pressing in. The way the branches leaned. The way the silence thickened. It didn't feel like cover. It felt like a trap. I unwrapped the logbook, pencil stiff in my glove. The first entry scratched weak but steady. 1,700 hours, position taken. Clearing visible. No enemy movement. The words looked small on the page. Smaller than they should have. As if the forest itself had leaned down to read them and found them unworthy. The pines creaked overhead, swaying slow. Snow fell steady, each flake catching what little light was left, drifting down like dust in a long-forgotten room. I pressed my back against the fallen log, rifle across my lap, ears straining. 4 boots. 4 whispers. 4 wire cut. But all I heard was the forest breathing. And I realized. Silence in the city is empty. But silence in the woods is alive. The first hours were quieter than orders ever expect. Quiet in that winter way, not absence, but a lid. As if the snow had set a hand on the world and said, hush. I lay still in my hollow between the down pines. The bark pressed cold through my coat. Pitch smelled sweet beneath the frost, a summer smell trapped and saved for this hour. Snow collected in the crook of my elbow, a soft weight that learned my shape and kept it. I wrote. 1,730 hours, clearing steady. No tracks since last fall. Pines creak. Wind low. The pencil left a faint shine on the graphite where the paper had grown thin with damp. I blew gently, a careful breath, to keep flakes from sticking to the words. The breath turned to needles and settled anyway. Across the clearing, the tree line held its own breath. Black trunks, white shoulders. Branches drooped under their loads, the whole forest stooped as if to listen better. When the wind shifted, the pines pressed together and whispered in a tongue men don't speak. The sound was close to surf, close to distant blood in the ear, close to memory. I learned fast that every sound had a double. A branch cracking might be a step. A step might be a branch. A crow's wing through snow might be a coat stirring. Silence might be someone choosing not to be heard. 1755, single crack left flank. Likely load shift in pine. Observe. The crack came again, farther back, polite as a reminder. Then nothing. I let my cheek rest against the stock, wood cold, iron colder, sight line threaded through falling white. The sight picture was mostly snow, large flakes up close, fine dust beyond, so that any real shape would have to fight to earn its edges. Nothing fought. Light thinned. The clearing blurred. The forest stepped closer by the measure of a shadow. 1815, visibility lowering. No movement. Wind veer north-northwest. Pine speaking. I should not have written that last part. But it was true. The timber had begun a long conversation with itself, loose needles talking against needles, old ice on bark answering with a dry rattle. Somewhere high above, a nest of ice let go and fell in a hush like a lifted curtain. A jay called once, short, flat, offended. It felt wrong to hear a living voice. It felt like someone laughing in a church. I shifted my knee a fraction to keep feeling from dying there. The snow complained with a muffled crunch that reached farther than it should have. I stopped moving. Let my heart slow. Let the forest have the last word again. Wind gave me a new sound then, a low moan from the stand to my right, not human, but close enough to ask for a second listen. I counted to 60, breath by breath. The moan repeated, longer, bending. Two trunks were rubbing together out there, making a mouth of their own. 1840, trunk rub, right stand. Repeat at 30s. No footsteps paired. My glove had gone stiff. I flexed the fingers inside the wool and then outside, where the cold punishes you for being alive. Pins, then ache, then the dullness that means you are losing the argument. I slipped my hand back around the stock, ashamed at how much it comforted. The forest's floor offered smaller stories, snow slid off a low bough and stitched a new hem along the drift. A cone broke loose and tumbled, the sound absurdly loud for so small a motion. Somewhere near my boots, a mouse, or the idea of one, stitched a tunnel under the crust. I pictured its warm mid of a body. I envied it everything. 1910, subsurface activity near position. Rodent. No threat. The sky lost its last color and kept the shape of itself only by the fact that it was not the ground. White on white, the clearing went empty in a way that felt deliberate. I could have been staring at a sheet hung to dry across the world. Snow found the gap between scarf and collar. It learned my neck same as it had learned my elbow. For a moment I wanted to stand and shake like a dog. I didn't. The forest would have called me a fool. A distant tree let go of something heavy. A thud rolled under the snow. Then another. Spaced. Measured. The mind made boots out of it, because the mind is built to survive by lying until it's sure. I wrote the only safe truth. 1940, low thuds, distant. Likely snow shed. Patterned but not paired with voices. Voices. The word itself warmed me in the throat. I swallowed it back down. For a while, there was only the careful clock of my own breath. I found a pace that neither steamed the sight too fast nor starved the lungs. The trick of winter is to be quiet even inside your ribs. A twig ticked the back of my helmet. The sound was so near that for one heart coin of a second I believed I had been found. I did not turn. The second passed. The forest offered me another. 2015, contact rear, vegetation. No follow-on. Maintain. Maintain. That word earns you one more minute. I thought then, not of home, but of a tree I used to sit under behind the garage, maple, summer, and how even in the laziest heat there was always a talk between leaf and sky. I remembered thinking as a boy that the tree was telling me the weather from inside it. The pines here had that same habit, but they were not lazy, and their weather was war. The first hour became the second because I said it did. Watches lie in winter. Men tell time by the ache. 2045, clearing unchanged. No tracks. No human noise. A crow landed at the far edge. He announced himself with a black seam against white and the casual arrogance of a king who knows he inherited something terrible. He hopped twice as if to prove his claim and then, deciding there were no bodies worth his time, lifted off and stitched the sky shut behind him with 2 strokes. He left me lonelier than before. Now and then, something small let go in the canopy and dusted me with a soft sound that, if you half closed your soul to it, fixed itself into syllables. Once it said my name. Once it said don't. Once it said here. I wrote the official line and kept the rest. 2110, canopy shed, phonetic illusions present. Disregard. The pencil's tip gave up and snapped. The little tick was crisp, almost cheerful. I sharpened it with the knife by feel, careful not to drop shavings where some later I might read them as sign. The blade rang once against a hidden stone under the bark. The note seemed to hover above the snow and consider me. I wished it away. 2120, tool noise minimal. No reaction. My stomach made a sound that embarrassed me more than any rifle shot. I handed it a scrap of cold ration and asked it to keep quiet. It obliged. Snow thickened again, a new style to the flakes, bigger, lazy, the kind that pile instead of drift. The clearing accepted them like truth. The line where animal tracks might have shown their past erased itself under a slow hand. On the far side, one branch decided to fail. It did it with ceremony, first the long sigh as weight committed, then the tear that is more feeling than sound, then the soft sigh when snow accepts the fallen. I let my lungs copy that last part and felt better for a moment. 2145, large branch fall, east. No secondary motion. The cold began to ask for payment from my feet. Pain was not the word. Pain is a coin you can count. This was a loan shark, interest compounding into blankness. I stamped once, fine, then twice. The second stamp was a risk, it traveled farther than the first. The forest noticed and did nothing. I promised my feet a fire I could not yet deliver and paid them with breath. A trick of wind put a new voice in the trees, long, low, almost a whistle but not quite. It rose, bent, and dropped. I pictured the shape of trunks behind it and guessed 2 pines leaned and disagreed, then leaned back. 2215, resonant trunk tone recurring. Interval 2040s. No accompaniment. Somewhere left a fox barked twice, the sound small and high, like laughter that had borrowed a knife. A minute later, a second fox answered farther away, bored with the first. I marked neither. The forest has its own war, which is not mine to log. What I did mark was the moment the woods learned my measure. It came as a feeling, not a sound. The trunks did not move, the boughs did not lower, and yet the space shrank until my shoulders remembered windows too narrow to pass through. If the enemy had walked into the clearing then, I would have been grateful for the interruption. I let the book hold the truth gently. 2240, pressure subjective increase. Maintain position. Harlow present. I should not have written my name. But the page felt better for it. So did I. The wind lost interest, and the listening changed direction. Snow softens when wind is gone. It landed like hands on a bedspread then, no insistence, only arrangement. The pines let their shoulders down as much as pines can. The forest and I were the only ones awake enough to notice the quiet had deepened into something that had nothing to prove. I stared into it until the sight blurred, then blinked and set the picture right again. The rifle lived in the same place across my lap. My pulse did the small work of persuasion against the cold. 2305, status unchanged. No enemy. Ears clear. Mind steady. The last was as honest as I could be. Steady does not mean unafraid. It means choosing version after version of stillness until one fits. Close by, a clump of snow slid from a bough and hit the ground with the exact sound of a man sitting down carefully to rest. I did not turn. I let him be who he was. I let myself be who I had to be. When the hour finally gave itself a name, I wrote it before it could change its mind. 23:30, first hours complete. Clearing holds. Forest active. Watch continues. I pressed the period longer than I needed. It left a small crater in the graphite and in me. The crater filled with a single flake and became whole. The forest kept breathing. I breathed with it. And the night, very politely, went on. By the third hour, the branches stopped being branches. They became mouths. It began with a creak. Long, low, bending under snow. I had heard creaks before, wood complaining, ice shifting. But this one held a shape. Rising at the start, dipping in the middle, catching at the end. A syllable. I told myself it was nothing. Wind and weight, nothing more. But the forest had learned me by then. And once it learns you, every sound becomes a word. The second creak answered the first. Higher. Shorter. Two trunks rubbing together somewhere above the hollow. The sound leaned into my ear like a whisper. Not clear. Not full. But close enough to fool the mind into filling gaps. Here. That's what it sounded like. I wrote it down, though I shouldn't have. 0005 hours, two trunk tones. Phonetic resemblance, here. No confirmation. No confirmation. The book demanded that line. The forest did not. After that, the woods grew bolder. Each shift of branch carried more voice. Each fall of snow sounded like a sentence cut short. I gripped the rifle tighter, though it was no use against pines. The wind pressed through again. Low, steady, carrying the weight of thousands of needles. The sound rolled over me, long and deep. And for a heartbeat, it wasn't wind. It was breathing. The forest itself. I pressed the pencil down, hard. 0020, wind tone resembles breathing. Note for record. The lead snapped. I sharpened it slow, scraping against the log until sparks danced. The sound was wrong, sharp, metallic. It cut through the forest's voice like a shout. And the woods answered. A crack to my left. Loud. Sudden. Deliberate. My breath froze in my chest. I turned the sight that way, barrel steady, eyes straining. Nothing moved. No shadow. No man. Only snow settling where a branch had fallen. But it hadn't fallen by accident. Not this time. The page blurred as I wrote, glove shaking. 0030. Sudden crack left flank. Visual negative. Forest active. Forest active. 2 words no officer would sign. But they were the truth. After that, I stopped pretending the branches were wood alone. They creaked in voices, long and low, carrying syllables I almost knew. They bent toward each other like men trading secrets. And each time the wind pressed harder, they grew louder. So I listened. Because that was the order. Because that was the trap. And the forest listened back. By the 4th hour, the snow stopped falling like weather. It began to fall like eyes. Each flake landed heavy. Not in weight, but in notice. They gathered on my coat, on the logbook, on the rifle across my lap. And I could swear each one paused before melting, as if to look at me. The forest wasn't just speaking anymore. It was watching. The clearing blurred under the new drift. What had been a flat sheet of white became a shifting skin. The wind brushed across it, shaping ridges like ribs, valleys like veins. The snow was no longer cover. It was a mirror. And I was caught in it. I wrote. 0-100 hours, snowfall heavy. Visibility reduced. Clearing transforming. Transforming. That was the only word that fit. Because the ground itself was changing shape, moment by moment, while I stayed still. The flakes struck louder than they should have. A soft patter against the logbook. A hiss against the branches. A whisper when they touched the scarf at my mouth. Each sound small. Each sound harmless. Together, a choir. And the song they sang wasn't weather. It was notice. My scarf dampened quick, freezing hard. Breath gathered as frost, sealing wool to skin. Every exhale grew louder, sharper, until I could swear the snow leaned closer to hear it. I muffled the sound with my glove, hand trembling. But the snow caught it anyway. Because nothing is quieter than falling snow. And nothing hears better. The logbook pages curled, wet at the edges. I brushed flakes aside, careful not to smear the words. But one page blurred anyway, pencil lines washed thin. The words still present faded into gray streaks. And I thought, maybe the snow wants the book as much as me. Maybe it wants to erase proof that I was ever here. I pressed harder. 0130, snow interfering with record. Still present. Still awake. The words dug deep, dark against the page. So dark they tore it. But at least they stayed. The clearing disappeared under the drift. No tracks. No shapes. No way to tell what had been there before. If a man had walked across, if an army had marched, the snow would have hidden it all. That was its power. To cover. To erase. To watch. The forest creaked again, branches shifting under new weight. A long, low groan. And this time, I didn't hear words. I heard laughter. Thin, cold, distant. But laughter all the same. The snow didn't just watch. It mocked. I lowered my head, scarf stiff with frost, eyes on the book. And wrote the only truth I could stand to see. 0200, watched. Still present. The pencil shook. The words looked crooked. But they stayed. Even as the snow tried to cover them. By the 5th hour, the cold stopped being air. It became intention. It chose places in me and worked them. First the fingers. Then the toes. Then the small, important muscles that keep breath behaving. The cold didn't rush. Hunters don't. I flexed my hands inside the gloves. Nothing, then pins, then the dull ache that means you're paying back interest. The stock of the rifle felt like stone that had learned how to steal. I moved the rifle a half inch and felt that half inch all the way to the teeth. I wrote. 0215 hours, cold severe. Manual dexterity reduced. Maintain. The pencil left a groove more than a line. I took that as proof. Feet next. Winter likes the long way around. It climbed from toes into arches, pooled there like bad water, then crept to the ankles where it made camp. I stamped once, twice. The second stamp traveled too far in the quiet. The forest pretended not to hear. I promised my feet a fire they would not see tonight and paid them with breath again. The cold learned my breath. It waited for the moment between in and out and set its teeth there. I altered the rhythm, shallower, slower, so the bite would miss. For a few minutes it worked. Then the cold learned that rhythm too. Hunters learn. A small tremor started in the jaw and moved inward until it found the place behind the sternum where men store their promises. It shook there and made a sound like a coin in an empty cup. I held my mouth closed so it wouldn't speak aloud. 0240, shivering onset. Audible discipline required. Maintain posture. Discipline required. The page didn't argue. Pain is a kind of map. It tells you where you still exist. The map shrank. Fingers, blurred borders. Toes, fog on the coast. Face, gone except for the sting where snow kept its thumb. I put the back of my glove against my cheek to check if I still had one. The cheek reported in late and unhelpful. 0255, facial numbness. Vision clear. Mind, steady enough. I let that last part stand. Enough is an honest kind of brave. The forest offered a lesson in patience. A bough out in the clearing bowed lower grain by grain until, after an hour of decision, it let go. The sound was not loud. It was complete. The cold approved. This is how to win, it seemed to say. Not by striking, but by adding one more flake to a world already near the line. I thought of boys' games at home, stacking cards into towers just to see where collapse lived. The cold plays the same game, but with us, and never smiles. 0320, large snow shed east. No follow-on. I flexed the trigger finger, slow, careful. It moved like someone else's. Hunger showed up just to see if it could help. It knocked politely, a hollow sound under the ribs. I handed it the last hard scrap and let it soften against the roof of my mouth while I listened. The forest accepted that small noise as a tithe and allowed me the next minute in peace. 0335, rations low. Watch continues. Forest voice steady. Voice. I used that word now without apology. The trees creaked in long vowels, the trunks rubbed in low consonants, the wind did the rest. The cold tested memory. It brought me a kitchen. Steam on a window. A loaf being torn, not sliced. Hands that did not shake handing another pair a cup that smoked in a friendly way. I let the picture sit just beyond reach so it wouldn't hurt. Then I sent it back. I wrote the facts I could keep. 0350, no tracks formed. Snow still. Pressure subjective high. Harlow present. Present. I circled it once with the pencil. The circle went oval where the glove refused to obey. At some point the forest and the cold learned each other's names. The creek lowered in pitch, the better to match the shiver. The wind flattened until it was a hand. The snow eased its fall to listen. That's when the cold hunted the small muscles in the eyes, the ones that hold the sight steady. The front post nodded, not much, just enough to turn precision into suggestion. I blinked the nod away and put my cheek back to the stock to tell my body who was in charge. 0410, sight wobble minimal. Corrected. Maintain. Maintain is a prayer, properly said without lips. There's a place at the base of the skull where winter keeps a key. If it finds the lock, you start to drift. Not sleep. A polite removal from the business of being here. I felt the key test the wards. I named colors to fight it, the black of the trunks, the white of the world, the gray of the hour, the slow iron blue in the hollow where the snow had learned my name. Then I named the men in my squad in reverse order. Then I named the parts of the rifle. Then I named the sounds I would accept and the ones I would not. Accepted: wind, rub, fall, sift, small life. Not accepted: boots, metal, breath not mine. 0425, wakefulness maintained with drill. Drill has a warmth of its own, borrowed from the bodies of the men who taught it to you. The cold tried kindness. It offered to make everything easy. Just let it be quiet, it said. No need to hold so tight. The forest will keep your place for you. Lie back. Look up. See the snow learn the sky and the sky learn the snow. I wanted to. I did not. I wrote instead, jaw tight to still the small sound the thought had made. 0440, post held. Temptation noted. Declined. The pencil point skated, then bit. A fox crossed the far edge of the clearing, a thin brushstroke from one set of trees to the other. He moved with the competence of a creature who has never needed fire. He paused halfway, laid his head to the side as if listening to the same low rub in the trunks, then went on. His feet left perfect signatures, sharp as handwriting, that the next fall of snow erased as if editing a draft. I envied the clean exchange, step, mark, gone. Men leave smudges. I didn't log the fox. Some things you keep. The worst of the cold came just before the idea of morning. It gathered itself and made one last argument. It set its teeth where breath meets blood and squeezed. My hands shook. Not fear, wires plucked by winter. I pressed the logbook to my chest, felt the tremor transfer through the paper into the small animal that a book is when you ask it to keep you. It kept me. 0515, shivering severe. Mind intact. Forest unchanged. Harlow present. The last two words in a darker hand. Somewhere a branch in the near stand refused. It held its snow when everything else let go. It held and held until holding became a law. When it finally surrendered, the fall sounded like a man sitting down after a long day to admit he is tired. We understood each other then, the branch and I. 0530, heavy fall near right. No follow on. Maintain. I breathed a little deeper. Let the air hurt. Let it prove there was still something in me worth hurting. Then, not light, only the idea of it, arrived as a thinning of the dark. The snow regained detail. The trunks became individuals again instead of a single agreement. The clearing looked like a room where someone had lifted the curtain a finger's width to see if the storm still believed in itself. The cold took a step back. Not far. Just enough to let me count my fingers again and find most of them. 0555, gray up. Watch continues. Position intact. Intact. Another word that earns you a minute. The forest breathed, and I breathed with it. The cold watched from the doorway, learning a new plan. I laid the pencil along the spine of the book, put the cheek to the stock, and gave the world one more stillness. The hunter would try again. So would I. By the 6th hour, the forest stopped being a place. It became memory. Not mine. Its own. The snow eased, leaving the clearing still, white, waiting. But the silence was no longer empty. It was full. Full of footsteps that had walked here years before. Full of voices that had whispered and shouted and died beneath these pines. The forest remembered them all. And as I listened, it shared them with me. At first, I thought it was echo. A crunch of boots, faint, distant. Not mine. Not now. I held my breath, rifle steady, eyes straining across the clearing. Nothing moved. But the sound came again. Boots on snow. Measured. Heavy. And I realized, they weren't coming closer. They were already gone. Footsteps left behind, walking again because the forest refused to forget. I wrote. 0615, footsteps heard. No visual. Temporal distortion possible. I shouldn't have written that last part. But it was the truth. Because the forest didn't just hold sound. It replayed it. Like a needle caught on a record. Like memory stuck on repeat. The branches creaked again, but not with words this time. With weight. The weight of years. The weight of men who had passed through before. Each groan carried history. Each sway carried ghosts. And I thought, maybe these trees have seen more than any soldier. Maybe they remember more than any man. A rifle crack sounded then. Sharp. Sudden. I ducked, heart racing, ear ringing. But the sound didn't echo. Didn't fade the way real shots do. It hung. Then dissolved. A memory. Not fired tonight. Fired long ago. And kept. The forest doesn't lose things. It saves them. I pressed pencil to paper with shaking hand. 0640, gunshot heard. No enemy present. Possible memory echo. The words looked mad. But leaving them unwritten would have been worse. The silence deepened after that. Not empty. Heavy. I could feel the weight of every man who had ever crouched in these woods, waiting like me. Men who never left. Men who still lingered, their breath caught in the bark, their voices woven into the roots. And I wondered. Would the forest remember me too? Would some soldier years from now hear my footsteps, my whispers, my fear in the snow? I wrote again, though the page blurred with frost. 0700, still present. Still awake. Trees remembering. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was writing for the trench. Or for the forest. By the 7th hour, I realized the forest wasn't just speaking. It was listening. Not passively. Not politely. With intent. With hunger. It began small. Every time I shifted, an elbow pressed deeper into snow, a boot stamped once to keep blood awake, the forest answered. A creak. A groan. A crack carried back through trunks. As if my smallest sounds were repeated. Not mocked. Acknowledged. Like the woods were keeping score. The logbook pages shook under my hand. I forced words down anyway. 0730, forest responsive. Movements echoed. Not alone. Not alone. The pencil dug deep into paper with that last line. I wished I hadn't written it. Because once confessed, it couldn't be taken back. Then came the breathing. Not mine. Not the wind. Slow. Steady. Measured. I held still, lungs tight, throat locked. And yet the sound went on, a rhythm too large, too deep, spread across the clearing like a hidden chest rising and falling. The forest itself breathing me in. Snowflakes landed louder than before, as if the air itself had leaned closer to hear. Each impact on my sleeve, my collar, my scarf struck sharp. Tiny signatures. I brushed them away, frantic. But the snow fell heavier, eager to return. Each flake another question, still here. Still here. I pressed the scarf tight to my mouth. Whispered into the wool. Still present. The words froze against fabric, brittle, breaking as they left me. And the forest creaked back in answer. Not yes. Not no. But heard. That was when I understood. I wasn't the only one on watch. The forest had been given its own orders. To listen. To record. To remember. And I was just another entry in its book. The first voice came from the tree-line. Low. Faint. Familiar. Harlow. I froze, blood turning slow. It was Corporal Latham's voice, steady, clipped, the way he used to bark orders in the trench. But Latham was gone. I'd seen the stretcher carry him away 2 weeks earlier. And yet here he was, whispered through pine and frost. I raised the rifle. Sighted across the clearing. Nothing. No boots. No shadow. No man. Only trees, bent low with snow. The voice came again. Still here. 2 words I knew too well. The same words I had been writing, over and over, in the logbook. The forest wasn't just listening. It was speaking back. Repeating me. The pencil scratched fast, jagged. 0800, voice heard. Resembled Latham. Echo of logbook entry. My hand shook so hard the line split. But the word stayed. And that was proof. Proof it wasn't only in my head. Then came another voice. Softer. Private Ellery, the youngest of us, barely more than a boy. I remembered his laugh in the trench, high and nervous, like he was trying to joke his way out of the mud. I hadn't heard it since the last shelling. Now it drifted through the pines. Broken. Thin. Not laughter. Whimper. Don't leave me here. The forest had kept him. And now it gave him back. I pressed my hands to my ears, headset digging hard into bone. But the voices didn't stop. They came through the wood. Through the snow. Through the silence. One after another. Men I knew. Men I'd lost. Each voice repeating something I had once heard, something I had once written, something I had once feared. The forest had learned our words. And now it was reciting them. I looked at the logbook, pages warped with frost. Line after line of still present. Still present. Still present. The forest was reading them back to me. Proof it had been listening all along. I pressed pencil down with all my strength. 0830, forest repeating. Voices not own. Presence unclear. Still present. Still present. The words nearly tore the paper. But I needed them. Because if I didn't write them, the forest would write them for me. By the 7th night, the forest wasn't just repeating me. It was waiting for an answer. The voices circled the clearing. One moment behind me. The next across the snow. Then close, too close, whispered from branches just overhead. Each one familiar. Each one already gone. Still here. Don't leave me. Stay. Not commands. Invitations. My throat burned with the urge to answer. To say yes. To tell them I was still here. To prove I hadn't vanished yet. The words rose to my lips, breath catching in the scarf. But I bit them back. Because I knew. The forest wasn't asking to hear me. It was asking to keep me. The logbook slipped in my lap. Open pages fluttered in the draft, words smudged by snow. Still present. Still present. Still present. The forest whispered it again, perfect, like a child repeating a lesson. I nearly laughed. I nearly cried. Because those words weren't mine anymore. They belonged to the woods. I stood halfway. Boot lifted, knee bent, body leaning toward the trench I could not see. The voices grew sharper, quicker, pleading now. Stay. 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 The trees groaned with the same rhythm. The snow hissed it against my ears. Stay. I almost did. Almost gave myself to the silence, to the roots, to the weight of branches overhead. But the logbook fell open across my knees again. And the page stared back. Empty. Waiting. I pressed the pencil down with trembling hand. 0900, voices demanding. Forest alive. Still present. The words crooked. Half smeared. Barely legible. But they were mine. Not the forest's. Mine. The voices dimmed after that. Not gone. Never gone. But softer. As if disappointed. As if waiting for another chance. I clutched the book to my chest. Held it like a shield. Like a prayer. And whispered into the scarf, one last time. Still here. The forest creaked low in answer. Not yes. Not no. Just listening. Always listening. Dawn came without color. No gold. No warmth. Just a slow gray spilling across the clearing, enough to show the trees as shapes again instead of shadows. I blinked into it, unsure if the night had ended, or if the forest had only changed its mask. I waited for boots. For the crunch of relief moving through snow. For a whistle carried faint from the trench. For a voice, human and alive, calling my name. But none came. The clearing stayed still. The pines leaned quiet. The forest breathed, slow, steady, endless. I wrote anyway. 0700, light increasing. Position intact. Relief absent. The pencil dragged dull. The page curled wet. But the word stayed. Proof I stayed. Snow had buried half the hollow. It pressed at my knees, piled against the log, sifted across the rifle in a pale blanket. Each flake settled like a hand, holding me down. I brushed it away, weak, half-hearted. The snow returned faster. Watching. Always watching. I pressed the logbook to my chest, close enough to feel its warped spine against my ribs. The voices from the night lingered faint, but distant now. Not gone. Never gone. Just waiting. When I finally stood, knees stiff, joints aching, the forest groaned. A long creak overhead, like disapproval. Branches bowing, snow shedding, trunks rubbing low. Stay. That's what it sounded like. I shook my head. Whispered into the scarf. Still here. But leaving. The words cracked in my throat, frozen, fragile. But they were mine. Not the forest's. I turned back toward the trench. 50 yards, maybe less. But it felt farther. As if the forest had stretched the space while I waited. Each step sank deep, snow dragging at my boots, pulling me down. The woods groaned with every motion, voices rising, branches whispering. But I kept moving. One step. Then another. Then another. When I looked back, the clearing was already different. No trace of me. No trace of the hollow. Only snow. Only trees. The forest had erased me as if I'd never been there. Except for the book in my arms. Except for the words, still present. I reached the trench just as the light found its edge. Faces turned toward me, surprised. One of them said my name. Alive. Human. Real. But I hardly heard. Because the forest was still listening. Even here. Even now. And I knew. I hadn't left it behind. I had carried it with me,